So you've probably scrolled past that internet fact floating around out there, the one saying woolly mammoths and the Great Pyramids existed at the exact same time. It sounds like a glitch in the timeline, doesn't it? Well, today we're going to break down how these two completely different worlds actually overlapped and how they surprisingly shared the exact same downfall. Think about it. On one side of the globe, you have this massive, sun-drenched empire building stone monuments on a scale humanity had never seen. And then, way over on the other side, the very last remnants of Ice Age megafauna are freezing on a tiny rock in the Arctic Ocean. They shared a timeline, sure, but the really wild part is that they met the exact same fate at the hands of the exact same global event, and the data connecting them is just fascinating. To really make sense of this, we need to map it out. Look at the timeline here. Over on the left, right around 2600 BC, Pharaoh Khufu is busy constructing the Great Pyramid of Giza. We're talking about the absolute peak of the Egyptian Old Kingdom. Now, drag that timeline all the way over to the right. The very last confirmed woolly mammoth on Wrangel Island dies out around 1650 BC. So for roughly 1,000 years after the Great Pyramid was completed, mammoths were still just roaming the Arctic. They didn't just overlap for a brief window. We are talking about a massive span of centuries. And to lock this timeline down, we actually have an ancient shipping logbook. This quote comes from something called the Diary of Mir, which archaeologists found on the Red Sea coast back in 2013. It dates to roughly 2570 BC. Basically, it was a daily record kept by an inspector named Mir, who ran a work crew ferrying massive limestone blocks across the Nile to the pyramid site. It's an amazing find because it anchors the Old Kingdom's dates to the mid-3rd millennium BC with absolute day-by-day precision. And get this, look at that number 200. That is roughly how many blocks of limestone Mir's crew was shipping every single month during the Nile flood season. And keep in mind, each of those blocks weigh between 2 to 3 tons. It's so easy to view the pyramids as these mythical, abstract structures, right? But records like this show the concrete, totally relatable logistics of a massive state just doing the heavy lifting month in and month out. So let's pivot north. As the Ice Age ended and the world warmed up, that dry, grassy mammoth steppe that covered the north turned into wet, soggy tundra. It was an environment the mammoths just couldn't thrive in. At the same time, all that melting ice caused sea levels to rise, which flooded the Bering Land Bridge. As the ocean swallowed the mainland connections, a few high-elevation areas were cut off, trapping small pockets of mammoths on these newly formed islands. We actually have a great point of comparison between two of these isolated spots. Over in the Bering Sea, there's St. Paul Island. The mammoths there died out around 5,600 years ago, and they weren't hunted. Their island just kept shrinking from the rising seas until they literally ruined their own scarce freshwater supply and died of thirst. It's a pretty stark cautionary tale of how vulnerable isolated megafauna are to environmental shifts, even without humans around. But then you have Wrangel Island. It was a much larger landmass sitting way up in the Arctic Ocean, and it had a stable enough climate that allowed a remnant population to hold on for thousands of years longer. When Wrangel Island physically separated from the mainland, the mammoths stranded there were facing a massive survival crisis. Genomic modeling shows that their founding population was incredibly small. We're talking at most just 8 reproducing individuals. But here is the crazy part. They didn't just fade away immediately. Over the next 20 generations, the herd actually rebounded. They hit a stable population of about 300 individuals and managed to hold that line for roughly 6,000 years. Now, because of that extreme bottleneck, scientists have found that their DNA was heavily mutated. Since they were so inbred, they actually managed to purge the most instantly lethal genetic defects from their gene pool, but they accumulated a ton of mildly bad ones in the process. We're talking weird, translucent satin-like coats that probably didn't insulate them very well. Their sense of smell was heavily degraded, meaning they would have had a hard time finding food or even each other. They even carried genes pointing to neonatal diabetes and low male fertility. They basically became a herd of highly isolated genetic mutants. But here's the crucial twist to the story. Despite all of these genetic mutations, the population didn't slowly dwindle away. Their numbers stayed completely flat and totally stable at around 300 right up until the very end. Sure, they were heavily mutated and ecologically brittle, but they were actually surviving just fine out on their island. Now, just as a quick side note, because these timelines overlap, you might be wondering if the Egyptians actually knew about the mammoths. There's this famous painting in the Rekhmire tomb showing Syrian traders with a tiny, hairy, domed head elephant. Back in the 90s, a theory popped up that this was actually a dwarf mammoth traded all the way down to Egypt. But we really need to myth bust that right here. Mediterranean dwarf mammoths were completely extinct hundreds of thousands of years before the pharaohs even existed. And the Wrangel Island mammoths? They were full-sized, not dwarves, and completely isolated up in the high Arctic. So it's almost certainly just a weirdly drawn juvenile Asian elephant painting by an artist taking a few creative liberties. The Egyptians and the mammoths were sharing the earth, for sure, but they definitely weren't interacted. If the mammoths didn't slowly die out from bad genetics, something sudden had to have taken them out. Enter the 4.2 kilo year event. Starting right around 2200 BC, global climate systems basically broke down. Ocean current shifted and it completely rewrote the planet's weather patterns for over a century. It triggered intense cooling and severe megadroughts all across the globe. Down south in the subtropics, the effects were nothing short of apocalyptic for human civilization. The megadroughts caused the seasonal flooding of the Nile to just stop, and without that reliable floodwater, Egypt's agriculture was completely ruined. Famines hit, the highly centralized government fractured, and the mighty Egyptian Old Kingdom just completely collapsed. Meanwhile, way up in the high Arctic, that exact same chaotic weather looks completely different. Instead of droughts, it brought these erratic rain-on-snow icing events to Wrangel Island. Here is how that works. Step 1, you get a freak surge of warm air right in the middle of winter that drops heavy rain over deep snow. Step 2, the temperature inevitably plunges back below freezing, turning all that waterlogged snow into solid ice. And step 3, you're left with a thick, impenetrable crust of ice directly over the tundra. Remember, these mammoths were genetically compromised and couldn't smell well. They couldn't break through that ice to reach their food. An entire herd can literally starve to death in a matter of weeks when something like this hits. Now, you might still be wondering about human hunters. And it's true, Paleo-Eskimos did actually arrive on Wrangel Island right around 1600 BC, which is incredibly close to the final radiocarbon dates of the mammoths. But here's the thing, researchers haven't found a single butchered bone or mammoth kill site anywhere on the island. Humans showed up to an island that was almost certainly already empty. It wasn't overhunting that wiped them out, it was a definitive freak weather anomaly. And that brings us to the craziest irony of this entire timeline. The exact same global climate shift, the 4.2 kilo year event that brought the megadroughts that starved the Nile and collapsed the Egyptian Old Kingdom, is the exact same event that brought the erratic icing that starved the last woolly mammoths. A giant human empire and the last giant land mammals both fell to the exact same localized extremes of a single climate shock. It's wild to think about. We tend to look back at the pyramids and the mammoths as these invincible ancient giants. Yet both of them had hidden vulnerabilities, and both were taken out by a sudden, erratic shift in the Earth's weather. So it really makes you wonder, if a massive human empire and a millennial-old species can both be wiped out so quickly by climate anomalies, what happens to our own highly complex yet fairly brittle systems when a sudden climate shock hits us today?
What the fact? Follow for more.